Alien child's tears stopped instantly when the human approached. Here's why. The wind on Oreo 7 didn't behave like it did on Earth. It howled through the fractured craters in low, resonant tones. Like a sad trombone suffering from a midlife crisis, some said the wind carried echoes of past battles' voices. Whispering warnings, memories of vaporized soldiers, or maybe just the recycled complaints of bored patrolmen. Sergeant Malcolm Ryan, currently posted to the most remote listening post on the moon's outer crust, preferred the theory that the wind was just lonely and trying to start conversations. He leaned back against a chunk of alien rock, chewing a ration bar so dense it may have been a former meteorite. His helmet HUD flashed the same message it had for days. No signal detected. The scanner wasn't broken. There really was nothing out here. Not unless you counted the occasional hallucinogenic gas bloom that made you see your childhood dog arguing politics with your third-grade teacher. Ryan had learned the hard way not to trust the mushrooms either just because they could sing didn't mean they were friendly. Day 24, he muttered into his recorder. Still no signs of hostile life, still no signs of friendly life, still haven't figured out what that one toilet button does. His voice echoed through the empty landscape, which was a mosaic of jagged mineral growths and glowing fungal patches. Oreo 7 had once been a mining outpost, then a battlefield, then an archaeological dig site, then a battlefield again. Now it was a bureaucratic afterthought, a place where soldiers were sent to not bother anyone important. Ryan had been transferred here after making an offhand joke during a diplomatic dinner involving an ambassador's forehead and a high-speed comet. Apparently not everyone appreciated astrophysical humor. His scanner chirped. At first Ryan ignored it. It had chirped once last week too, and that turned out to be a flying crustacean that wanted to mate with his drone. But the chirp came again, then again, and then the display lit up with a pulsing green marker just northeast of his current location, near a valley known to locals, which was to say 2 drunk pilots and 1 boatist, as the Jellybone Crevice, which sounded like a bar or a very unfortunate medical condition. Ryan stood up, brushing crumbs off his uniform and sighing. Well, Jellybone, let's see what secrets you're hiding. The trek to the valley was uneventful except for the moment he stepped in something that yelped, swore at him in fluent Portuguese, and scuttled off. Ryan made a mental note to start carrying translation bugs for his boots as he descended into the crevice. The air grew warmer, not the humid kind of warm, but the electrical kind, as though he were walking through a dream powered by static and old television signals. He ducked beneath a rock arch and stopped there in a hollow framed by bioluminescent vines and whispering spores. Was a woman, at least she looked like one. Her hair flowed like liquid mercury, shimmering with violet and silver hues that caught the faint light. Her ears were elongated, graceful arcs that twitched at every sound like the petals of a sentient flower. Her eyes, a pale luminous teal, locked onto him with such intensity that he almost apologized on instinct, though for what he wasn't sure. She was crouched, low arms around a small child who trembled against her chest, letting out small breathless sobs. The child's eyes peeked out from tangled hair and immediately closed tight at the sight of him. The woman shifted, one arm wrapping protectively over the child, her other hand moving subtly toward a smooth metallic shard half buried in the moss. Ryan held up his hand slowly. Whoa, easy, I'm not here to start anything. Honestly, I'd have to fill out paperwork if I even stubbed my toe out here. The woman tilted her head, not moving the shard. Ryan's translation module struggled, spitting out a string of syllables, and then defaulting to language unknown, probable illusory origin, communication pending, of course. Illusory, the race humanity had been told to watch, to fear, to expect trouble from. The usual recipe for interstellar misunderstanding. But the woman didn't look like an enemy. She looked like a mother caught in a storm, and for a second Ryan felt something stir in his Chest recognition, empathy, or maybe just the beginnings of heartburn from the ration bar. Look, he said, crouching carefully, I'm just a glorified babysitter out here. You and your little one stumbled into the one zone too boring to be dangerous. Congratulations. The child hiccuped, startled by his voice, and cried louder. The sound was unlike any baby he'd ever heard, part ultrasonic, part whale song, and part rusty harmonica. It made his helmet mic go fuzzy for a moment. Ryan winced. Okay, that's a sound. That's a very advanced cry. You got an off switch on him. The woman blinked, then to his complete astonishment her lips twitched. A smile, tiny, uncertain, but unmistakable, played at the corners of her mouth. She said something soft to the child, who quieted just a little, and then, in a voice thick with accent but unmistakably clear, she asked, you not kill? Ryan blinked. What? Oh, no killing. I barely passed basic firearms training once. Shot myself in the foot with a safety-equipped stun rifle. Another blink, then out of nowhere she laughed, a light, breathy sound that bounced off the surrounding rock like wind chimes made of stars. The child peeked up at her, then at Rye, and let out a giggle of his own. Ryan grinned, shifting to sit cross-legged in the moss. Well, I guess we're making progress. Let's just sit here and pretend none of us are supposed to be pointing lasers at each other. The woman watched him, her body still half tense, but something in her posture changed. The shard lowered a little, not dropped, not yet, but no longer a threat. She said something else. The translation module clicked, hummed, and then whispered, you are not like others. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, I get that a lot. You should see me dance. This time the laughter came quicker, and beneath it, a thread of something else took root. Curiosity, wonder, perhaps even the tiniest glimmer of hope in the shattered valley of Jellybone Crevice under the humming canopy of bioluminescent spores. And the ever-listening wind. Two strangers stared across the ancient line between species, and something ancient, or maybe brand new, began to stir. Malcolm Ryan hadn't moved in over 20 minutes, and his left leg was starting to fall asleep, but considering the situation, he wasn't about to shift and accidentally spook the alien mother sitting a few meters away. She still looked ready to leap into action at the slightest flicker of threat, her long, tapered ears twitching toward every subtle sound in the hollow. The child had finally stopped crying, though his enormous eyes kept flitting back to Rye, like he expected him to suddenly grow fangs and sprout a third arm. Ryan carefully reached for a ration packet clipped to his belt. It made a crinkling sound as he opened it, apparently packaging engineers had never considered stealthy snack retrieval as a priority. The woman tensed again. Hey, he said, gently holding up the dull silver pouch like a peace offering. You ever had salted synthetic cheese foam? It's exactly as terrible as it sounds. Want some? She tilted her head, squinting at the packet like it might explode, which, to be fair, was a legitimate concern. The last one he opened sprayed foam directly into his eye, and he'd hallucinated a tap-dancing moose for 6 hours. Ryan peeled the corner and squeezed the tube onto his finger. It jiggled ominously. He tasted it anyway, made an exaggerated face and mock-gagged. See, I eat it and suffer so you don't have to. The child gave a muffled giggle and buried his face in his mother's shoulder. She looked from her son back to Rye, and for the first time relaxed just enough to sit more comfortably. The sharp-edged tension in her limbs faded, though her eyes stayed locked on him, watchful. Okay, he said, shifting carefully so his leg wouldn't fully lose circulation. How about we figure out what we call each other? I'm Rye. That's not short for anything. My parents had a thing for rivers and poor life choices. The woman blinked at him. He tapped his chest. Rye. She hesitated, then said softly, Ella. His helmet mic pinged, trying to phonetically interpret the name, and came up with a visual of 3 syllables wrapped in a melodic waveform. The name rolled like a sigh through the clearing. LRA. Ryan repeated, mangling the pronunciation enough that even the mushrooms winced. Got it. And the little Guy, she looked down at the child. He was watching Ryan with a curious intensity that seemed disproportionate to his age. She whispered something, a sound like wind passing through crystal, but the translation AI didn't even try it, just blinked politely and gave up. Right, Ryan said, I'll call him Mini LRA for now. Unless that's offensive in your culture, is it? No, blink twice if I'm culturally insensitive. Ara narrowed her eyes. He wasn't sure if she was confused, annoyed, or mildly entertained. Still, this was the longest conversation, if it could be called, that he'd had with someone who wasn't his neurotic squadmate Dax, or a talking floor mop that had gained sentience after a lightning surge. Compared to that was a breath of fresh, if slightly nerve-wracking air. The hollow around them pulsed with gentle light. Bioluminescent vines responded to sound, brightening when someone spoke, dimming in silence. Every breath felt like part of a rhythm. Ryan found himself instinctively whispering so the world wouldn't flicker too much. A thought struck him. Hey, why are you here anyway? Not to be rude, but this moon isn't exactly the top tourist spot in the galaxy unless you're into ancient battlefields and lonely soldiers with snack issues. Didn't answer, but something flickered behind her eyes, a ripple of emotion too complex to name. She looked up at the sky. The thick cloud cover shifted, revealing a sliver of stars like a wound in the darkness. Then she spoke. Slow and deliberate. Hide from fire. Fire, Ryan echoed. You mean like lasers, ships, people with itchy trigger fingers and bad attitudes? She nodded. Once Ryan frowned. That wasn't good. No one had reported illusory activity in this sector for months. If she was hiding from someone, then either command didn't know or they did and hadn't said a word. Suddenly, a noise behind him, a soft crack, a whisper of air shifting. Ryan whipped around, hand going instinctively to the pulse pistol at his hip. Era didn't. But the child clung tighter to her. A rock rolled from a ledge above them, bounced twice, and came to a stop. Ryan waited. Nothing else, probably just gravity doing gravity things, or a curious animal, or one of the many sentient fungi that like to spy on people and then gossip about them too. Birds. Still, he stayed on edge. Okay, he said, lowering his hand, maybe we shouldn't linger too long. You've got a good hideaway here, but if someone's looking for you, they might find it, and trust me, most of the folks I work with aren't as charming as me. Dax is pretty okay, but he talks in binary when nervous. Elle raised a brow. You stay? The question was simple, but it hit him harder than expected. I mean, I shouldn't, he said, scratching the back of his neck. Technically, I'm supposed to be scanning mineral activity right now, which is code for we don't trust you near actual people, but honestly, you and Mini LRA are the most interesting thing to happen out here since the drone tried to marry a toaster. She didn't understand all of it clearly, but she nodded. Ryan took that as permission and settled in more comfortably, resting his back against a moss-covered rock that sighed softly when he leaned on it. Probably sentient, hopefully friendly. They sat in a quiet truce for a long while. Era fed her child from a pouch of shimmering liquid that smelled faintly like cinnamon and ozone. Ryan nibbled the rest of his ration bar and tried not to think about how it tasted like despair and cardboard. Eventually, the child dozed off. Era stroked his hair, her long fingers surprisingly gentle. She looked up at Ryan with an expression that was no longer guarded but curious. You dream strange, she said, unprompted. Ryan blinked. Excuse me. She tapped her temple. Your mind it? Echo. Old Ryan stared at her, unsure what unnerved him more, the implication she could sense his thoughts or the fact that something in him might already be echoing hers. He laughed a little too quickly. Yeah, well, I've been told I've got an old soul and terrible sleep habits, but her face remained solemn. She wasn't joking. He leaned forward, voice low. What do you mean? What do you see? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she reached into the folds of her garment and held up something small, a shard of crystal faintly glowing, its edges pulsing with faint golden light. As she placed it gently on the moss between them, Ryan's helmet began to hum softly. Like a memory stirring beneath static as he stared at the crystal, something deep inside him stirred something he didn't recognize, or worse, something he almost did, and all around them the vines began to glow a little brighter. Ryan didn't consider himself a spiritual guy. He once got into a fist fight with a vending machine over a stuck protein bar, which pretty much summarized his views on the universe. You put something in, expect something back, and usually get disappointment wrapped in aluminum. But as he stared into the pulsing glow of the shard had placed before him, something stirred in him that made vending machines seem like distant, harmless beasts from a forgotten age. The crystal wasn't big, about the size of a walnut maybe, but the light inside it pulsed with a rhythm that tugged at something beneath the skin, beneath the muscles, beneath everything. It wasn't just light, it was memory, or maybe possibility trapped in refracted time. Era didn't say anything she didn't have to. The look in her eyes said it all. This wasn't just some shiny rock her kid found in the dirt. This was sacred or dangerous, or both. Ryan tried to speak and found his voice caught halfway between confusion and mild indigestion. So I'm guessing this isn't the Alisiri version of a baby rattle. The crystal shimmered as though laughing at his attempt. Finally broke the silence. It remembers you. Ryan blinked. I what? She nodded, once solemn. Your kind had these long time ago, before walls, before fire, before names that didn't help much. He tried to recalibrate. Wait, are you saying humans had this, like in the past, ancient humans? Lara tilted her head. Number not human before human. Oh good, Ryan said, rubbing his temples. Perhuman metaphysical existentialism. Classic. Thursday smiled faintly. You joke to hide confusion, lady. He replied, I joke to hide everything. Before he could ask another question, the crystal pulsed again, this time brighter, and with a low hum that bypassed his ears and went straight to the bones in his chest. His HUD fritzed for half a second, then rebooted. A moment later, a projection flickered out of the shard. Not a hologram exactly, more like a visual memory. It shimmered with that half-real quality that made Ryan feel like he was standing in someone else's dream. A massive structure rose in the air before them, all spirals and impossible curves. It hovered over a landscape that looked eerily like Oreo 7, but greener, wilder, and floating near the top of the spire was a ring of light. Orbiting like a crown, figures walked beneath it, tall, elegant beings, not unlike a LRA, though they shimmered slightly, their forms too fluid to be entirely solid. Then the image changed. Explosions, fire, the spire collapsed, the crown of light shattered like glass in a hurricane. Shadows fell from orbit, not ships, but jagged shapes like broken teeth. Everything turned black. The projection ended. The crystal dimmed. Ryan let out a breath. He didn't know he was holding well that was cheerful. Got any other artifacts that show me kittens learning to dance or something? Didn't laugh this time. You saw the fall? Yeah, big fall, like in Interstellar. Humpty Dumpty situation. She didn't get the reference, but her voice softened. That world, mine, yours. Before split the shard remembers whole. Wait, hold on, Ryan said, trying to stand, only to realize his legs had gone numb again. Are you saying humanity and Alisiri came from the same place? Nodded slowly. Two branches, two choices long ago. Now we are stories told in different tongues. He looked down at the crystal again, wondering if he should poke it. His rational brain said no, but that part of him also once told him sticking a spoon in a gravity wave to see what happened was a good idea. But why me? He asked. Why show me this? I'm not some scholar or diplomat. I once failed an ethics quiz because I thought it was a trick question. Looked at him, eyes narrowing like she was seeing something beneath his skin. Because the shard heard your heart. Ryan pointed to his chest. You mean this thing? This is mostly sarcasm and cholesterol, but she was serious, dead serious, and that made it worse. The crystal caves of Oreo 7 had a reputation, not the kind that earned 5 stars on travel review boards, but the sort whispered between night will watch techs and half-sober pilots who'd lost Drones inside. According to legend, the caves were alive, not in a cute pet me way, but in a semi-insentient, rearranges its own layout to confuse you kind of way. Great for getting lost, less great for military operations. Ryan hadn't expected to be spelunking with an alien woman and a half-asleep toddler, but here he was hunched beneath a stalactite that hummed when touched, following Era's sure steps through the flickering tunnel while his boots squished ominously against some bioluminescent moss that probably had a name like slurpweed. This is a terrible idea, he muttered, looked back, adjusting the child on her hip. Then why do you follow? Because I've already made worse decisions today, he whispered, ducking a low beam of translucent crystal that pulsed blue as he passed, and also because running from my own people with you is oddly satisfying. She gave him a look that might have been confusion, amusement, or both. You enjoy disobedience? Oh, it's my best skill, he replied, that and opening snack packs with one hand. The child made a sleepy noise that almost sounded like a giggle. Ryan grinned despite the creeping dread climbing up his spine like a suspiciously intelligent vine. The tunnels pulsed with a strange heartbeat rhythm, like the caves themselves were listening in on the conversation after what felt like an hour of ducking, weaving, and occasionally apologizing to hissing crystal clusters that might have been insulted. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, a dome of shimmering stone, speckled with luminescent veins of every color imaginable, arched above them like the inside of a gemstone. Ryan stopped in his tracks. Whoa, the word echoed back, distorted and echoing like a choir of surprised ghosts. The child squealed and clapped. Aura turned, her expression softer now. The sanctuary. Ryan raised a brow. You sure? Because if this thing starts chanting or tries to read my future, I'm out. No future, she replied, only memory. She stepped forward and placed the crystal, still faintly glowing, into a natural pedestal of jagged stone. The light spilled out in a wave, licking the walls and ceiling, lighting up old markings carved deep into the rock. Symbols, circular and fractal, spun slowly in midair. Ryan's helmet pinged with a dozen translation fails before giving up entirely. I don't suppose any of this says exit is this way, does it? He asked. Era didn't answer. She was staring at the symbols, her eyes wide and glistening. Slowly she began to hum again, that same tune from before, but this time the symbols responded, rotating faster, aligning, and then Ryan saw it in one of the floating patterns, a shape that made his stomach drop. A spire, the spire from the shard's vision, only this one wasn't crumbling. It stood proud, surrounded by beings not just illusory but human-like forms. To wait, he stepped closer. That's us, she nodded. Before division. Ryan frowned. You keep saying that? Division of what? People, cultures, cable providers. A smile was small of paths. Long ago your kind chose stars, we chose memory. Ryan crossed his arms. Well, I hope memory comes with a dental plan. The chamber pulsed again. This time it responded to his presence, not just light but temperature, pressure, sound. The crystals around him brightened when he stepped forward, then dimmed when he stopped. Okay, that's creepy, he said. Creepy and vaguely flattering. Then one of the crystal veins split, spilling a wave of light that flowed toward his boots and paused. It rose slowly, forming a vague outline of a person, broad-shouldered, vaguely similar to him, but shimmering in a way that suggested it wasn't entirely real. Ryan took a step back. That better not be future me, not future, whispered echo. Memory. Ryan stared. The figure mimicked him, every tilt of the head, every twitch of his fingers, not like a mirror, like it knew him. The child, who had been watching in wittied wonder, pointed and said something in his melodic tongue that translated roughly as funnel-looking uncle. Ryan glanced at what he said. She tried not to smile, failed roughly. The memory figure faded, dispersing into sparks that lingered like fireflies before vanishing. Ryan let out a long breath. So I'm what? A reincarnation of some lost hero, a galactic janitor who missed his shift in doomed civilization, not Reincarnation said softly. Resonance, he blinked. That's not a helpful word, you. No sounds poetic, but also like something I'd get from eating spoiled synth dairy. Your presence stirs the past. She said you are reminder. You pull the old paths back into light. Ryan sank onto a nearby rock which hummed comfortingly beneath him. Great, I'm a cosmic reminder. The universe's sticky note. Something rustled behind them. Ryan jumped to his feet. The child clutched his mother. The air shifted. Not like before. This wasn't the caves responding. This was outside boots, more of them, and not the polite kind. Scan found us, Ryan muttered. They must have sent in drones with adaptive resonance. Cheap but effective. Era grabbed the crystal again. We must move. Yeah, he agreed, but not the way we came. We need an exit. Not on their maps. She nodded and moved to a far wall where crystal thorns jutted in spirals. She pressed her hand against them. At first nothing happened, but then a grinding deep sound echoed and a new tunnel yawned open behind the wall. Ryan grinned. You guys really know how to do dramatic architecture. They ran, or in Ryan's case, stumbled while trying not to trip over vines that looked suspiciously smug as they passed deeper into the tunnel. The walls began to change, smoother, darker, marked with lines that glowed faintly with gold. Where does this lead? He asked between breaths. Era's voice echoed back. To the edge. Of what? She didn't answer. They emerged into a narrow pass flanked by sheer cliff. Stars twinkling above them. The air tasted cleaner, colder in the distance. The silhouette of a long, dead-end structure rose like a broken skeleton against the sky. Ryan stopped. That another spire? Era nodded. The last hidden, forgotten. And we're going toward it. You wished for answers, she said, smiling. Ryan stared at the ruins, at the stars beyond, and the strange child now holding his finger. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. He sighed. All right, but if that place doesn't have coffee, I'm staging a mutiny. The path to the forgotten spire wound like a drunken worm through the fractured landscape. All jagged stone and glowing moss that squished in ways that felt morally wrong beneath Ryan's boots. Above them, the stars spun lazily, indifferent to the small, bumbling fugitives threading their way across a landscape older than history, and twice as grumpy. Ryan had long since stopped trying to rationalize what was happening. Somewhere between the cave that rearranged itself on a whim and the memory ghost of himself projected by a singing rock, he'd quietly abandoned logic and replaced it with sarcasm and caffeine withdrawal. You ever notice? He panted as they climbed yet another slope that had no business being this steep. How ancient alien structures never come with elevators. Didn't answer. She was focused, her long ears twitching subtly at each shift in the wind. The child in her arms was awake now, chewing solemnly on what appeared to be a glowing beetle. Ryan wasn't sure whether to intervene or pretend it was an Alishire teething ring. And keep walking, you know, he continued, dodging a low-hanging vine that tried to grope his helmet. I was supposed to be on a recon scan today. Check for old ruins. Confirm no hostiles. Back in time for mediocre dinner and passive-aggressive emails from command. But no, you are good at complaining, said without looking back. It's a hobby some people knit. I complain. As they crested the ridge, the spire revealed itself fully, a towering ruin of twisted crystal and obsidian metal rising from the earth like the spine of a dead god. Chunks of it floated in midair, held aloft by faint pulses of energy that shimmered like heat waves. Lightning crackled lazily between the shards, and the wind carried a low hum like the planet itself was muttering ancient curses under its breath. Ryan stopped, eyes wide. Okay, wow, that's impressive, also terrifying. I give it 4 stars. Loses a point for the death cloud aesthetic. Era said nothing. She just stared at the structure, her expression unreadable. Something in her posture shifted, not fear but reverence, as if stepping onto sacred ground. The spire wasn't whole. Time had taken its toll. Some towers were collapsed, others floating just out of reach like forgotten thoughts, but its core remained a massive archway still pulsing with a Faint living energy, what is this place? Ryan asked the cradle, she said softly. That's vague. Here was the last convergence where both kinds met. Ryan tilted his head. You mean humans? And Elishari nodded. Before the fall. Before silence, the child babbled and reached toward the archway. A tiny spark leapt from the spire's surface and danced across his fingers. He giggled. Your kid's going to grow up with some serious stories, Ryan muttered. Hope your school system has a good mythology department. They approached the entrance slowly. A metallic hiss echoed as they stepped onto the platform, and Ryan's HUD flared, strange glyphs scrolling across the edges of his vision. Then, without warning, the archway lit up. Ryan staggered back. Nope, that's a portal. I've seen this movie. Touched the edge of the arch. It remembers. Yeah, well, I'd like it too. Forget especially the part where I'm involved. But the structure didn't seem interested in his opinion. The arch flared again, and this time a corridor opened, not physically but through perception. One moment it was solid wall, the next a hallway of living crystal extended inward, humming softly. Seriously, Ryan said, if this thing starts offering cryptic riddles and trials of worthiness, I'm out. I've seen enough ancient nonsense for 1 week. I gave him a look. You are very loud for someone. Afraid it's part of the charm. They stepped into the corridor. The air changed instantly, warmer, denser, charged with static and memory. The walls shimmered with half-formed images, a star map here, a flash of a long-lost battle there, glimpses of cities made of light and sound. Ryan slowed, reaching out to touch one image. His fingers passed through it, but the sensation was oddly familiar, like brushing against a memory that wasn't his. Did we build this? He whispered. Not we, Ella replied us. He stopped and looked at her. You really believe that, don't you? He asked. That we're not so different? She tilted her head. Do you bleed only when people shoot at me? Then yes, he chuckled, but it was hollow. They emerged into the central chamber, a vast circular space beneath the shattered core of the spire. A single structure stood at its center, a daze of floating crystal shards rotating slowly around a sphere of liquid light. Symbols hovered in orbit around it, flickering like dying stars. Era stepped forward, placing the shard she carried into a recess at the daze base. The symbols brightened, the sphere pulsed. Is that safe? Ryan asked. Because it looks suspiciously like it wants to talk to me. It does. Great. The sphere expanded, enveloping them in light. Ryan flinched, but instead of burning or blinding, it wrapped around him like warmth, like déjà vu. And then the voice spoke, not with sound, with thought. Fragment recognized binding protocols initiated. Ryan staggered. Okay, that was in my head, definitely in my head. Subject, human designation, echo of initiate. Knelt, head bowed. The child just clapped. Echo of what now? Ryan muttered. The light shifted, forming images again, this time clearer, sharper. A council chamber, humans and Elishari seated together. Discussion, conflict, a decision. A split, one path toward conquest and speed, the stars, another toward memory preservation. The deep places, a final image, a man, human, familiar, staring into the same sphere. His face flickered, and for a moment Ryan saw himself. That's not possible. Era's voice was a whisper. You were chosen then, and now. The chamber dimmed, the images fading. The convergence begins, then silence. Ryan exhaled. Okay, so either I'm a reincarnated space hero, or this thing just hit me with the mother of all acid trips. Era smiled faintly. You still joke. It's either that or scream. Outside the spire groaned. The wind picked up, and from far below distant booms echoed the approach of others. Ryan turned. We've got company. Ara's eyes were calm. Then let them come. He looked at the sphere, then at her, then back at the child now asleep in her arms. Okay, he muttered, let's see what kind of mess this convergence really is. The first blast shook dust from the ceiling of the spire like cosmic dandruff. It was a lazy tremor, more warning than threat, but it carried a promise, the kind of promise made by trigger-happy commanders and ships that bristled with rail guns. Ryan peeked around a column made of what he now recognized as some sort of semi-inscient crystal alloy. It flickered. In a way that suggested mild disapproval. Well, he muttered, that's the sound of diplomacy dying. Outside the spire's fractured husk, the first wave of human scouts had arrived. Their black armored figures darted between stone outcroppings, moving with the caution of soldiers who had absolutely no idea what kind of weird alien nonsense they were about to step into. A recon drone zipped past the broken archway above them, buzzing like an angry metal mosquito. Can they see us from there? Ryan asked. Squinting upward, crouched beside him with her child pressed close, didn't look worried. The spire is older than their sensors. Great, so it's not just haunted, it's stealthy. The baby, blissfully ignorant of interstellar politics, was chewing on a chunk of crystal that glowed faintly with every bite. Ryan wasn't sure if this counted as teething or communing with ancient tech, but either way the kids seemed thrilled. Okay, Ryan said, kneeling beside them, let's talk options. We can't stay here, but if we leave we walk into a firing squad. I'm good, but I'm not. Survive 20 armed soldiers and a drone with attitude. Good looked up toward the ceiling where the rotating crystal core still hovered. The spire has other paths. I was afraid you'd say that. She placed her hand against a nearby column. A low tone vibrated through the chamber, followed by the soft grinding of unseen gears. A new tunnel opened behind them, not carved but folded, as if the very walls of reality had politely stepped aside. Ryan blinked. I both hate and love this place. They entered the passage, the air turning cooler and more dense. This new corridor was narrower, its walls smooth and pulsing faintly with bioluminescent veins. Strange orbs floated midair, reacting to their movement, flickering between warm yellow and a nervous green. Do these things judge people? Ryan asked. As one orb buzzed near his shoulder. They remember behavior, replied, gently guiding the baby's hand away from poking one. Ryan gave the orb a look. Don't worry, I recycle. As they walked, the corridor began to slope downward, gradually turning from crystalline architecture into something else, older, darker. The polished walls became rough, the glow more sporadic. It felt less like they were walking through a building and more like stepping into the bones of something that had once breathed. Where does this go? He asked, voice hushed despite himself to the well. That's also vague. You really like cryptic answers. Nodded at his tradition. Rinsed. Why couldn't I have crashed into a planet with straightforward people? Hello, welcome to our library of secrets. Here's a map and a cup of tea. That would have been nice. As they descended, the hum of the spire faded behind them, replaced by something more primal, a rhythm, a pulse.